Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. This episode is a previous recording of our live Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer series, where a live audience asks questions of professional Scrum trainers. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you might be around the world. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, or today's what we call Ask a Professional Scrum Trainer. My name is Eric Neiberg, and I'll be your host today. And joining me is Yuval Yaret, who is one of our professional Scrum trainers, and he will be the expert answering today's questions. Real briefly, for those of you new to Scrum.org, who is Scrum.org? We're founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. He is our chairman and founder, and Ken continues to lead Scrum.org as an organization. We provide thought leadership like these webinars to help you and help you grow. Training, Yuval being one of our professional Scrum trainers, certification and ongoing learning, all based on our mission of helping people and teams solve complex problems. With that, I will let Yuval introduce himself and we can get started.
Thanks, Eric. Always great to be here and answer questions. Curious to see what questions the audience has. I've been an Agile practitioner since 2006. Got introduced to Scrum and Kanban, and in recent years, I've been helping people trying to make sense of Scrum, Kanban, other techniques, how to achieve agility. More recently, it's been a focus on helping people in domains that aren't the classic stomping grounds for Agile and Scrum, people like Gillette, biotech firms, taking Scrum outside of its comfort zone. But wherever I went, whichever companies and people I talk to, there's always been this feeling that in order to really achieve agility, Scrum at the team level needs to be supported by the right sort of leadership, by acts of leadership at all level. So earlier this year, I've had some conversations with Dave West at Scrum.org, and we've written together this companion to the Scrum guide that talks a bit more about the leader's perspective to Scrum. And, I'm excited to answer any questions related to that and questions in general that come up today.
Awesome. Thank you, Yuval. And with that, let's get to your questions. Again, please use that Q&A tab down at the bottom of your screen, and we can get started. Let me stop my share because you don't need to have this up all the time. This way you can get a full view of Yuval. Yuval, starting off, how do you define leadership? We hear the word leader all of the time, right? Is a Scrum Master a leader? Do you have to be a C-level to be a leader? How do you define leader?
Yeah. So indeed, I can see two definitions. One is the everybody is a leader definition. And I really think everybody needs to be a leader at certain points in time and at certain activities. Specifically within Scrum, the Scrum Master is a leader, the product owner is a leader of the product. Developers are leaders for things that happen within the team. But there was a vacuum in the Scrum Guide when it comes to leaders outside of the team that have a role in supporting the team, helping the organization achieve agility. So in the guide, in the companion that we wrote, we define leaders as people that are outside of the Scrum team. It can be an HR manager, a people manager, department heads, can be the CEO, can be people at different levels. They don't have to be executive leaders, but they can be. The important thing is that from the Scrum Guide perspective, they don't see themselves as a concrete role on the Scrum team. They are external to the Scrum team. they might be a stakeholder for a Scrum team, they typically will be. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you, Yuval. And let's keep going. That's great. I think that's helpful. And if people have questions about leader and how that's defined, please feel free to ask them. First question we have, as an agile coach, how do you ask leaders who don't seem to want advice or coaching about agile issues if they want to talk, especially if they don't engage with the lower levels?
One of the powerful tricks that I use as an agile coach is to connect to these people's within, what's in it for them. If they don't really care about whether their teams are successful or not, agile or not, if they don't really care about the agility of the organization, they're not going to engage. But most people that I encounter these days do care about that. They do care about being more competitive. They do care about whatever buzzword they call this, whether it's a digital transformation or time to market or whatever, they relate to these things. And by talking to them at the language that they resonate with, we can get them to be interested in what's needed for their teams and their people to actually achieve those goals. In the Scrum.org world, we have the evidence-based management framework, EBM, which is really designed to talk at that level, to talk at what are the business results that we're achieving. Are we improving our ability to innovate, our time to market? Are we happy with the current value that we're providing in the market? Is there an unrealized value or unrealized potential that we're trying to achieve? Is there a gap that we're trying to close? And we use Scrum or whatever agile approach in order to close these gaps, in order to improve our ability to innovate and our time to market. And that's language that leaders typically resonate with, at least in my experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Yuval. The next question, this is a bit of a software-y question, I think, but I think it's one that comes up quite a bit. Would you consider architects, if not on the Scrum team, as a leader? How do you best support them? How do you best support the team's decisions around architecture and so on?
Yeah, I definitely see architects as leaders. And from my perspective, they also need to be leaders who serve. The most effective architects I've seen are people that see their role as growing and nurturing developers on teams that think about architecture the right way, that know how to balance the needs of forward-thinking architecture in balance with emergent design. Being a leader doesn't mean that they do everything, that they control things from the ivory tower. It means that they're available to people, they provide guidance, they provide alignment on what's important to us, they show the way, while still creating a lot of space for teams to have the autonomy and agency around figuring out exactly how to align with that architecture.
Great. Thank you, Yuval. And I think, yeah, anybody can be a leader, and that's I think what's interesting. Leadership isn't a title, right? Leadership is something that people do, and something that others respect someone as well. But people, as you're saying, people have to take on that role. People have to consider themselves in that role a bit as well, as they're working through things and not just doing the work sometimes.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting that we talk about the leadership role, and I think learning from the Scrum guide that made the transition towards accountabilities back in 2020, I think leadership can be seen more as everybody's accountability at different points in time. You don't need to have a business card that says, I'm a leader, I'm in the role of a leader, to take on a leadership stance in the relevant times.
Yeah, absolutely. Sahasha has a good question. So what is the Scrum Master's role in enhancing leadership at different levels? What can they do? Do you have some advice for how the Scrum Master can support leaders and enhance that leadership across the organization?
So let's look at two aspects of this. Within the Scrum team, I think it's pretty easy to see how the Scrum Master's role is to coach the different accountabilities, the different players on the team to step up and lead in the relevant times, to coach the product owner in leading from a product perspective, providing a vision, using product goal to guide the team on where to focus. They have a role in coaching the developers on the team to step up and not expect to be told what to do. Sometimes the Scrum Master's way of doing that would be to just actively do nothing, which might be uncomfortable, especially if they're used to being a leader themselves, being a manager themselves. Stepping into that role of growing people as leaders might be uncomfortable, but it is something that a good Scrum Master, a professional Scrum Master, would do. When it comes to conversations outside of the Agile team, a Scrum Master could, for example, take the companion guide that we wrote that provides some opportunities for leaders outside the team to reflect on how they show up, how they interact with Scrums, events, artifacts, accountabilities, and have conversations with these people about how to effectively show up as leaders.
Great, thanks, Yuval. And I will. I'm going to post a link to that white paper in just a moment. So what are the key skills that a traditional leader needs to change in order to operate efficiently and effectively with agile teams? And I know we talk a lot about this, and you teach the Professional Agile Leadership course quite a bit. We talk a lot about those things and how folks need to understand what their teams are doing. What are some of those skills that you teach leaders to change that mindset? A lot of it's not about skills. A lot of it's about mindset and how they think and act as well. Thoughts there?
Yeah. The most important thing, I think, is feeling comfortable with not calling the shots all the time. Feeling comfortable with decentralizing control and figuring out, spending much more time achieving alignment on what's important and clarity on what's important to us without controlling the details. Let's use OKRs, for example. OKRs are a buzzword these days. We talk about them as ways to define, to map strategy to execution, and a lot of leaders use OKRs in their organization. When you look at OKRs, one of the important things about them is the fact that they are an alignment framework. They provide the direction of what are we trying to achieve without controlling all of the details, without telling people exactly how to do stuff. In this way, by the way, leaders could learn a lot from what we're trying to teach product owners. Product owners provide a product goal, provide the product backlog to the team. They focus on the what and the why. They learn to give the team the space to respect the team's ability to figure out the how, to figure out how much they can actually achieve. That interesting relationship between developers and product owners is something that we can actually apply at the fractal scale, higher or in the organization or elsewhere in the organization. So a trick that I use a lot when talking to leaders is everything that we've learned that works for us at the team level, even if we use different names, even if it doesn't map one-to-one, the principles still apply at the organizational scale.
Great. Can you elaborate on the leaders as stakeholders? And this is an interesting question, right? Specifically, the scenario that they give is if the end user and decision maker, the check writer, if you will, is in a business group separate from the IT leadership, in the IT group that's doing the work, they're asking, would it conflict if a leader in the IT group proclaims themselves as a stakeholder and potentially manipulating the work in progress and quite possibly the product owner? So I think what they're kind of getting at here is, can I be a stakeholder as well as a leader within the organization? And then how, I guess, as to me, and this isn't asked in the question, but how I would kind of phrase this a little bit more is, as a Scrum Master, what would you do to help protect the Scrum team from someone who's both a leader and a stakeholder pushing their leadership too much?
Yeah. So the way I look at this question, and we talk about that in the companion, is one of the very crucial ways that leaders can serve their organization and serve Scrum teams is designing the right, agreeing on the right products, the right product goals, the right teams that support these products, and the right sets of stakeholders for these products. So somebody in the organization would need to step up and be a leader and figure out, okay, for this product that has this product goal that we set up, a Scrum team for, or a set of Scrum teams for, can be a nexus, can be whatever way you scale, or even just one team. This is the set of stakeholders for that team, and this is the set of expectations from these stakeholders. And somebody should be able to drive a conversation with these stakeholders around managing expectations. Stakeholders shouldn't feel like they're in control of the product. They should respect a product owner to lead that product, but that requires an active leadership in the organization in choosing the right product owner, setting up the right environment where that product owner is respected and empowered to have the agency to drive the product. If that is in place, then the product owner should be able to have effective conversations with stakeholders, whether they're from business, whether they're from IT, whether they're from anywhere, and gather their feedback and do the right thing for the product. The problem is that in a lot of organizations, we don't set up the product owner for success. We choose the wrong product owners, and we don't really have those conversations with stakeholders from business, from IT, from wherever, around what to expect. They might still feel like they're calling the shots. And, the product owner is not God. They don't have endless power. Sometimes the stakeholders, will drive some very important decisions. But we should create a situation where there's alignment, at some level of alignment, at least between these stakeholders on where to go. If we're an organization that has no alignment between business IT on where to go, that's a leadership challenge that somebody would need to step up and address. The role of the product owner, the role of the Scrum Master, what Scrum would do for us at a minimum is it would surface that misalignment. It would bring it up. We would see in the sprint review, for example, that there's no alignment on where to go. And that would be an impediment that would be at somebody's doorstep, at somebody's table to do something about. What we're talking about today is those leaders that will need to do something about these sort of impediments. that cannot really be addressed at the team level.
And I think from a product owner perspective, you need to be a good facilitator too, right? So as a product owner, it's not just about listening, it's about facilitating those conversations. It's about working with, you think about a small company, right? Working with your CEO. Your CEO is a stakeholder, they're a leader, they're an influencer, but they have to hopefully respect the product owner to make decisions. At the same time, that product owner needs to facilitate those conversations to make sure we're on the same page, because that CEO is also in theory, the check writer, right? And having those conversations, building that trust is so critical. The Scrum Master can help facilitate some of that, but I think, to me, the product owner needs to take on some of that role as well. And the product owner isn't just, I think there's some misnomers, right? That we talk about myths and myth busting all of the time. The product owner isn't just a requirements management person, right? They are a leader, and they need to facilitate with other leaders and stakeholders, not just customers, but also and users, but also the other leaders within the organization, those other stakeholders within the organization. Next question. This might be a little bit broad, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What are some of the ways that would allow you to improve in leadership? Do you have some guides, I guess, for leaders to help them improve, help them do better? How can they better support the teams that they're leading?
I would say that one immediate thing that comes to mind is connect to your teams. Ask them, what do they need? Be a steward for these teams. There's one client I'm working with, which is investing heavily in the concept of stewardship. We are there as leaders. They even have, a whole organization that includes people and operations that's there to be stewards of people's success. It starts with the mindset of, reversing the pyramid. I'm not on top of people. I'm not above people. I'm supporting them. I'm holding them up. I'm creating an environment where they can succeed. Most leaders, when they start to have that mindset, when they start to ask questions like, what do people like in what's going on here? What do people kind of struggle with? They get the right ideas. If you need some more, one thing that I love to do is to facilitate a retrospective that's focused on autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Get a couple of people from, across your organization. Can be a skip exercise, can be just meeting, teams, and watch Daniel Pink's drive video, a 10-minute video, and then have a conversation with people around what are we doing here that's really unleashing people's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. What are the things that we're doing right now that are impediments to people's autonomy, mastery, and purpose? And get some ideas from that. Have a conversation around, okay, what's the small thing we can try and do? We have that liberating structure, 15%, without changing the whole world. Just something we could do right now. What could we do to improve things a bit? Try something. See evidence whether it's working or not, and try something more. If that sounds to you like maybe let's set a product goal of improving the environment that people can work with, maybe start to create a product backlog around that, maybe a Scrum team around that, then you're thinking the right way about this.
Great. Thanks, Yuval. I think we've got a couple of more pure Scrummy questions, if you will, as well.
Sure.
I want to take. Alan asks, any thoughts or any feedback on how teams using multiple sprint goals rather than one, how they can handle that? Is it a good idea? Should
Yeah.
they do something different? And assuming, and I'm going to assume from Alan's question that they want to do this, do you have any suggestions on how to best handle it?
Yeah, I'm imagining that they don't necessarily want to do this. It's just the reality of what's going on for that team. The main thing I mean, generally what we say is the team should have one sprint goal at a time, because that's much more focus. It drives collaboration. It's much easier for the team to actually achieve something if they're focused on it. But a lot of teams struggle with this because they're pulled in many different directions. What I like to do is to use this as a signal to have a conversation around, are we set up for success? If once in a blue moon we need to work on multiple things on this team, fine. But if on a consistent basis we have a team that is pulled in different directions, has people that are working on different things, then it brings up a question around, do we have the right teams? And to bring this back to the topic of today, the topic of leadership, somebody needs to step up and think about, are we set up effectively? Again, the leader's role, somebody's role in an organization that is working on multiple products, trying to achieve multiple things, is to have a conversation around, are we spread too thin? Is it possible to have everything be strategic? Going back to OKRs, for example, we cannot have an endless number of OKRs. We should have only a few that we're really focused on. Can we set up teams that are really focused on a product goal? Are we set up that way right now? What needs to change for us to be able to set things up that way? In a sense, the fact that the team is not able to agree on a cohesive sprint goal is signal that Scrum is providing us to reflect on our setup, on are we set up effectively to achieve our strategic goals? Do we even have strategic goals?
Great, thanks, Shiva. So although the Scrum Guide tells us to use the retrospective effectively, some organizations tend to skip the retrospective. How can you lead a retrospective effectively as a Scrum Master, and how do you orient people toward it to see the value? Now, to me, if we're not retrospecting, if we're not looking at how we work, we're not really ever improving, changing. Do you have some thoughts and ideas around that?
Yeah, I definitely agree that if you're not continuously improving, you're probably leaving some opportunities on the table, especially because the environment we're using Scrum in, most work that happens these days happens in a complex environment in which we don't necessarily know what's the best way to work. We don't necessarily have the right approach for things from the get-go. Just taking the Scrum Guide, taking a professional Scrum class will get you somewhere from a process perspective, but you need to tweak it. You need to be able to react to things that you learn while doing the work. What I typically see is organizations that try to skip the retrospective because they're not able to convert the thinking, the time they spend retrospecting, to some actionable improvement on the team. And that might be because they're not focused in the retrospective. They try to change too much stuff, or they focus on changing things that are beyond their horizon. What I would start with is thinking about how would I facilitate a retrospective that converges towards something actionable, something that's within our scope of control as a team, that we can actually see meaningful change on within a reasonable time, ideally within our next sprint, and something that we're excited about. It should be something that as a team, we're really passionate about changing. If you have a team that doesn't care about improving anything, that's not passionate about making changes to how they work, then you need to dive deeper into what's going on. Maybe, there's this buzzword these days that people are using, quiet quitting. That's something you might need to do something about. If you're a Scrum Master, if you're a product owner, if you're a leader, you need to think about, how do I engage people in doing the work here? Can I, create some excitement about the mission? Can I create more cohesive product goals for what this team is working on? People rarely think their way of working is perfect. So there's typically something very close to the surface that's in the way of an effective retrospective that you can tap into and tweak.
Great. Thanks, Yuval. So Diane asks, what should leaders consider when thinking about whether Agile or Scrum is the right transformation to set off on their department or on their part of the organization? Do you have some guidance there? I know you do a lot of transformations. You're working with some big companies, even well outside of software around that. So you've got a lot of experience and advice I think you can probably bring here.
Yeah. My experience is that regardless of the domain, the context, the first question leaders need to ask themselves is, what's broken? Why would we need to change? I talked earlier about, EBM. Are we happy with the results of our product here? Are we happy with our time to market? Do we feel like we're able to innovate effectively, or do we have a lot of friction and waste and nothing seems to get done and it's all mired in technical debt? On top of that, a question that we ask is, what's the sort of work that we're doing? If we're doing complex work that's rife with volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, when we constantly learn whether what we're doing is useful or not, where we're constantly getting surprised by the results of our work and whether features are actually valuable, that is an environment that requires empiricism. That is an environment that requires us to close fast feedback loops. When we agree that there's some dissatisfaction with the way we're currently doing things, and we need empiricism to close faster feedback loops, then it makes total sense to try and figure out, okay, can we use something like Scrum or another Agile approach, whether it's Kanban or anything else, or Scrum with Kanban, to actually bring this empiricism to how we're working. And yeah, I think that's that. Let's pause here.
Great. Thanks, Yuval. What are some tips on how to facilitate or drive an organization from Agile to delivery to Agile culture? Right? And at the end of the day, Agile is all about, it's much more about a culture change. It's not just about delivering something, but it's about how we think, how we act, the trust that's built, the values that are put in place, and so on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's kind of, we sometimes call this doing Agile versus being Agile. I'm struggling with the premise of the question a bit, to be honest, because not because it's not an important topic of Agile delivery versus Agile culture. It's because what I've seen in the past is that when you don't have the agile culture of empiricism and self-management and continuous improvement and growth mindset, it's very, very hard to achieve agile delivery. It's possible to have agile theater, to have, all of the right names for things, to have a facade of being agile or doing agile, but it's very hard to really achieve agile delivery, closing fast feedback loops, learning about what's useful, adjusting, inspecting and adapting. And I think that's where I would focus my facilitation or leadership. Going back to if an organization really cares about competing faster, being more effective, achieving business agility, you want to call it that, then we can have a conversation around why that is basically impossible without having the right culture. We can look at examples of organizations that really achieve agility. They tap onto autonomy. They tapped onto alignment without micromanagement. They really understand how things like the Scrum values are crucial in working effectively with Scrum. So those are the conversations that I have. There are my experience is that most leaders don't really, there are the leaders that really care about the sort of culture, agile culture that we talk about. They care about it already. You don't need to do much to convince them to set up an organization that works this way. The leaders that haven't already bought into the tenets of an agile culture, the way to bring them on board is to connect it to business results, to connect it to why you would be limited, why you're not able to compete as effectively as an organization that doesn't have the right sort of culture. They won't do it just because an agile culture is cool. That's been my experience.
And you have to bring real world examples that they can understand and relate to directly to them. It's not just, you can't keep using the Blockbuster example for, as an example, because, okay, yeah, I'm not Blockbuster. I can change. I'm not, my technology or whatever, my business isn't being completely changed, but there are things that are happening, and even just in today's looking at it at a micro level, the fact that people are leaving jobs more than they ever left before. Well, how can we better retain people? What can we do to keep them happier so that we're not losing our top talent and keeping people together? And I think there's a lot of examples that can be pulled from there. You don't have to go to the big ones. There's a lot of smaller things that can be used within those conversations.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most important things we could do as coaches, as consultants, as people that are advising leaders on why and how to become more agile as an organization is to connect to their language, to the things that they care about, whether it's things in the news that they are worried about that are happening in their industry, whether it's stuff that is in their language, whether it's stuff that's specific to their company that you want to talk to. They would relate much better to things like that than to agile language in a vacuum. And partner with people inside the organization. There are people inside the organization that know what these leaders really care about. If you're inside an organization, you should focus a lot of energy on having empathy for where the leaders are. What are they looking for? What are they worried about? Why do they lose sleep? What's important to them? Create a map of where they are and meet them where they are.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Yuval. We've got a couple more Scrummy questions, if you will. Haley says, we're in the process of taking traditional operations teams and splitting out improvement and development groups from within them. As we do this, we're starting to think small, simple, which is more important if we can have only one or the other for a period of time, a product owner or a Scrum Master. Any thoughts there?
Interesting. It's like choosing, it's like asking a parent who's their favorite child. I guess it really depends on the context. I'll play the consultant trick and say it depends on the context. First of all, let's remember that the Scrum Master and Product Owner are accountabilities. You don't necessarily need to hire a person or choose a person that will do that full time and will have that on the organizational chart or on their business card or LinkedIn profile. Somebody on the team or in the organization could wear that hat, have that accountability for the team. And that's something I think, regardless of what you do, somebody should see themselves as the product owner for each team, focused on the product goal. Even if they do that, an hour a week, it's better than nothing. And I think in the context that you're talking about, somebody should see themselves as the leader that's focused on the effectiveness of this team. Somebody should be doing that. And one of the things that and again, I'll bring this back to to leadership, because I think a lot of these situations relate to leadership. A leader could step up and be a Scrum Master for these teams and act as the person that's focused on the effectiveness of these teams. But that doesn't mean that they need to facilitate events, that they need to, do all of the things that we classically associate with a Scrum Master. They would be a leader that's there at sometimes to support the team. If we have a set of people that really understand Scrum and can quickly self-organize and work effectively, we might not need too much support from the Scrum Master. If the organization is very much into Scrum, maybe we won't need that much leadership. From the environment that Haley is talking about, I think that sort of leadership is definitely needed. And similarly, if the product goal is very clear and the team can figure out a lot of what's needed to work towards achieving that product goal, and there's lots of clarity on the product, maybe we won't need too much or a product owner that would be very hands-on and engaged with the team. On the other end, there might be a situation, the result of having a product owner that's not very hands-on, that's not very engaged, might be that we're spending a lot of energy and driving in the wrong direction. That would be the conversation that I will have with this organization as they're trying to figure out how to use Scrum, what are the problems that they're trying to solve, and designing, who should be wearing which, taking on which accountability to really succeed using Scrum. I mean, we're using Scrum not to say we're using Scrum. We're using Scrum to solve problems, hopefully.
And that's a great point, Yuval. I think, remembering that a Scrum Master does not have to be full-time on one team. a Scrum Master can span across those different teams. Then they're there to help. They're there to support and serve those teams. To me, if we don't have a product owner, how are we prioritizing things? Is it just you don't want to do product ownership by democracy, because it might be the most popular thing, but maybe not the most valuable thing that we're going to work on. So product ownership is critical in that way. And for the team to work and really work together, having somebody that's seen to have those Scrum Master accountabilities is helpful. But we get this question a lot. I manage a bunch of different teams here at Scrum.org, and looking into support. People ask, does a Scrum Master have to be dedicated full time to a single team? The answer is no. They need to be available when they need to be available and be a part of that. Does the product owner have to be 100% tied to, every meeting, every event, every activity? No, they can't be. If they're doing that, then they're not talking to customers, they're not talking to stakeholders, they're not integrating with the organization. So I think there's some opportunities for this to have both of those sets of accountabilities, and it can live in many ways across that as you're moving forward. We've got some other questions coming in. So here's another scrummy one. This is always an interesting one, and I think it's okay to ask this because it kind of starts to tie to leadership, because I see this a lot. And I know you and I are both going to be at a project management conference coming up in a couple of weeks in the Boston area. Someone asks, how is a Scrum Master role different from a project manager? I've written a couple articles about this one, but I'll let you take this, Yuval.
Yeah. So the classic, it depends on the project manager, right? There are some project managers that see themselves as servant leaders that make choices like teaching, coaching, creating autonomy and self-management as their way to achieve success on their project. The traditional definition of project management, the one you learn, I'm not a PMP, but the one I kind of hear about and see in classic organizations and people that are in this space, the classic project manager manages the work, manages, scope, budget, timeline, how do things, work to achieve a certain predefined goal. A Scrum Master should be focusing on coaching the team. The Scrum Master is like a coach, a leader, a leader who serves the team in being effective. The Scrum Master doesn't own the scope, doesn't report up to management on what's the situation with a project or a product. Generally in Scrum, we try to avoid projects and move towards products. One difference being that we don't necessarily know what the scope would be up front. We know what the goal would be, and we're working towards achieving that goal by trying out different things, implementing some ideas from the product backlog, inspecting and adapting based on the results. So a Scrum Master breathes autonomy, empiricism, self-management, continuous improvement. Project manager manages to a certain scope, feels like they're the one single ringable neck for what's going on in their project. I think there's also an interesting comparison between the project manager and product owner. I do see a lot of classic project managers. Some of the best PSTs out there have been project managers in the past. They've seen a couple of things. They've seen that planning having a perfect plan from the get-go, executing to a plan doesn't really work in the real world, in the environment of volatility and uncertainty that we're seeing. They've seen that the results that you can get when you have talented people that know more about the work than you do, the results that you can get by them actually understanding the goal, being aligned to a goal, and having clarity on where to go, and having freedom and agency to actually manage themselves, you get better results, you sleep better at night, you work less hours. So a lot of these people that came from project management have switched the way that they're working and are focused much more on Scrum Mastery or product ownership.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'll get that question. I'm sure we'll get the question at this conference in a few weeks. So I'm a project manager. My company's going agile. What does that mean for me? And I give the typical, I guess, consultant answer, which is it depends. Right? The best Scrum Masters, it's more than just skill. It's who they are. It's personality. They have to care about people. They have to be amazing at coaching and helping and mentoring and teaching and all of these things. And I've met some amazing project managers that just don't have that mindset. And there's many other things that they can do in an agile organization to take advantage of their skills and their capabilities. It doesn't mean that they instantly go into Scrum Mastery. Just like you said, product owner might be a better place. Often the PMO doesn't necessarily go away. Project management, things don't just go away in an organization because they're moving into more agile approach. So you have to start asking the question of yourself of what am I best at? What are my skills and what is my mindset and how can I help support? But it's certainly, a Scrum Master is not a project manager. And if the organization or the Scrum team's treating the Scrum Master as a project manager, something needs to change, because then we're not self-managing, we're not working together, we're not getting the value out of the Scrum Master as well. Another question, we've got time for probably one or two more. What exercises, questions, stories can be used with top executives to not be in charge, as they wrote, and to trust the PO, trust that product owner, especially when the product owner is good and remains an order taker. And we see this in organizations where the leaders, the executives, just push the product owner to be a backlog manager, not really a product owner. What are some of the things you can do to help change that and help evolve that, Yuval?
Yeah. So I can see two things happening here. The leaders need to give, the product owners need to take. Sometimes leaders are willing to respect, delegate, give the space for the product owners, but the product owners are used to being order takers and they, just don't take stuff. So you need to be sensitive to what's really going on. Let's answer the core question here, though. One technique that I really like to use, and we use this in the professional agile leadership class as well, is the delegation poker. There's a whole set of there are several techniques like the delegation poker. The leadership ladder is another one that David Marquette created. All of them basically create a language that you can use to have a conversation with leaders around different decision areas and how are we currently approaching that area? Are we telling people what to do? Are we having conversations with them about what's the right answer? Are we really delegating to them? And also having a conversation around what's the right or what's the way we want to treat these decision areas. Do we want to decentralize the control here? What would be the benefit of that? What would be needed in order to achieve that? Do we need to create more clarity? Do we need to grow people's skills? Do we have the right people in place to actually delegate in that way? Sometimes I see leaders who are afraid of delegating to product owners because they didn't choose the right product owners, because they didn't create an environment where there's clarity on what's the product goal, with clear, passionate entrepreneurial product owners that can really take a product and run with it. And that should be the thing that leaders talk about. The conversation can start with, how are we delegating right now? And how would we like to delegate? What might be the benefit from that? Where does the conversation take you? Can be all over the map. Can be we're not set up effectively. Can be, we need to provide alignment more clearly about what's important to us. We need to have a conversation maybe about product goals. One of the benefits of product goals is that's a conversation that leaders can really have with product owners. If there's clarity on the product goal that a team is running with and a product owner is running with, maybe there's less need by these executives, these leaders and stakeholders to micromanage what's going on to achieve that product goal.
Awesome. Thank you, Yuval. And I want to be conscious of everybody's time here. We're about at time. I'm not sure we have enough time for any more questions. Yuval will take a look at all of the other questions that we didn't get to and try to respond to them the best he can via email and get back to you on those questions. And there are certainly still some sitting here and waiting to be answered. With that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your time today, Yuval. It's a great conversation. Thank you to the audience and for your questions and probing that conversation and making it happen. Come on back. We run these once a month, sometimes more than once a month. Keep learning, keep coming to the Scrum.org website as we continue to improve it and add more functionality, capability, and resources for you all to help learn, grow, and evolve. And with that, again, thank you. Have a great, safe day. And thank you again, Yuval.
Thank you, Eric. It was my pleasure.
Bye all.
Bye all.